Welcome to part 3 of this 3-part series on developing ISA volunteers for organizational success. Here in part 3, we'll cover some details. Performance problems, training, a board manual, leadership development, and additional references. If you don't deal with a volunteer performance problem, you'll lose the respect of other volunteers. Not all performance problems are the fault of the performer. There's generally 4 types of problems. One could be the quality of the work, the quantity of the work being done, the timeliness of the work, and the rate of improvement. So how do we solve performance problems? Some of the items to consider. 1, is it worth your time and effort? If it's not, don't bother. 2, does the volunteer know that their performance is unsatisfactory? Let them know and provide feedback. 3, does the volunteer know what's to be done and when? So let them know. It may require work planning and some training. 4, are there obstacles beyond their control? As the leader, you need to remove the obstacles. 5, does the volunteer know how to accomplish the task? If not, then provide training and/or practice. 6, do negative consequences follow non-performance? Consider changing the consequences, and if necessary, you might need to transfer the volunteer to something else. 7, do positive consequences follow non-performance? Here again, change the consequences. 8, could the volunteer do the tasks if they wanted to? If not, you'll need to either transfer or terminate the volunteer. And failing to deal with a performance problem is in itself a performance problem. After all, problems won't disappear if they're ignored. And you need to focus on the problem, not the person. If serious reprimands are required, do them privately. Sit face to face, not behind a desk. Use the job description to identify the expected behavior and the actions. Show a shared commitment to finding a solution to the problem. And finally, arrange for follow-up. Training. Everyone needs training. Think about this. Would you give your 16-year-old kid your car keys and say, "Well, good luck. I sure hope you figure out how to be a good driver"? New volunteers will make mistakes, but proper training will minimize their frequency and the severity. A board can't work as a team if they don't feel like a team. At least have an annual orientation program when new officers are elected. Allow time for everyone to get to know each other. Have them introduce themselves. Discuss your purpose and your policies. Explain the committee structure, the various responsibilities of all the groups. Clarify your goals and agree upon the objectives. You need to have budgets as well. So what's your mission and your purpose? What key results do you want to address? Establish goals, objectives, and timeframes. How will progress be measured? Who has the authority to do what? And who will evaluate success and when? Think about this, a board manual. A resource for understanding and clarification of all the positions. This is something you need to distribute during your initial training session. It should have the organization's purpose statement, the Constitution. All sections are independent and have their own bylaws. That should be printed down. The organization chart, your goals, your current plans, your annual report, budgets, and financial reports. The organization chart, the roster, all the contact information, emails, and phone numbers, all the different subcommittees that you might have, any personnel policies or expectations, if applicable, minutes from prior meetings, and probably the most important thing, lessons learned from previous chair positions. So this is a manual that would be handed down year to year to every new person who accepts that position. And every year, the previous person adds, at the end of their year of serving, all the lessons learned that they wish they would have had somebody provide them so they could have been more effective on their job. You want people to be able to hit the ground running. That's the purpose of a manual like this. When I first joined the Houston section board, way back in 1989, we had such manuals for every position. But perhaps about 10 years later, I found they just eventually fell by the wayside and they were no longer in use. When I became section president in Houston about 15 years later in 2005, I reinstituted those manuals. But about a dozen years later, I found they had once again disappeared. Unfortunately, it's not easy to maintain things like this. Unfortunately, this is a weakness which I've observed over and over. Unless you develop the leadership potential within others, you are destined to work too hard yourself. In your absence, after you burn out, and you will, things will come to a screeching halt and there will be nobody to pick up the ball. Until you develop a competent replacement, you'll be cast in your current position indefinitely. And is this really what any of you want? It's just an engraved invitation for burnout. So when you have an understudy, keep them posted on your plans and your progress. Assign them responsibilities and tasks gradually. Wean them into it. Delegate responsibility for specific tasks. Have them give you frequent progress reports. And they need to be accountable for what they're doing. And again, like all the other positions, they need training. Your successor needs to not only have a good resume, but hopefully they have the right experience as well. You'll just need to be old enough to know Jimi Hendrix and the title of some of his albums. So for those of you wanting more information, here are 3 excellent books that I found that I compiled into an additional document summarizing many of these. So what we've covered in part 3 are performance problems and how to handle them, training, a board manual and why you need it, leadership development, you need to recruit a successor, and additional references for further reading. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from this 3-part leadership series.